What is up everyone, MunchingOrange here and welcome to another Pokemon Sword and Shield discussion video. Today we actually had a brand new trailer drop. It's more of a video message from Omori himself, the director for Pokemon Sword and Shield, and he wants to show us some new features in the game that mostly show off the graphics and some of the areas we'll be visiting in Galar Region. And I wanted to take this opportunity to actually talk about the more general topic that's been going around the internet regarding the graphics in Pokemon Sword and Shield. So before we get into the eye of the storm, let's actually take a look at this new video that Omori has here for us, which like I said shows off a little bit more of the Galar region, mostly just the actual beauty of the region itself. Let's have a look. Look at that, he says they're putting everything into these games, and yet people are still not satisfied because at the end of the day, people always want more and will expect more. But like I said, we'll get into that whole storm later on, as here we've got a brand new town in the Galar region, actually one of the very first towns I believe in the map, right after the starting town or where your player house is. And here is the Pokemon Research Lab, or at least one of the two, because I think there are two labs, but here, Professor Magnolia researches the Dynamax phenomenon. Of course, we know Magnolia and Sonia work hand in hand, being her grandmother. There's also a railway station in this town. They've already introduced the flying taxi service, which of course, Corviknight, I was about to say, carries people between towns apparently. But there's more ways to travel around the Galar region, and it is confirmed now that all of the train railways that we saw on the Galar region map will actually allow you to get around the region. These stations are all over and used by all sorts of people, including our main character here. So, by the way, sitting confirmed, finally returning from Pokemon X and Y, the most anticipated feature that everyone wanted. You can actually sit down and wait for the train. I don't know if that means that the trains actually run on real time or like there is at least a schedule for them, but our character sits down here and can't help but think of that one time father left for his fishing trip, and I've been waiting here ever since. I know he'll come back eventually. So it looks like you can buy tickets to many different train stations, and I'm assuming that at the beginning of the game only certain towns will be available. I think after going through the first beginning route, you're actually going to be taking the train all the way to the Steampunk City, and that's where the story will open up, and you'll be able to access the wild area as well as go to the other gyms or the grass gym, depending on how the game goes. But yeah, check out that video if you haven't already. Let's take another look at this town and some more detail as well as the overall aesthetic of the Galar region. The Pokemon centers are different to those in other regions, but of course anyone can recognize that that is a Pokemon center with the Pokemar along with it too. I think that's what that little blue sign means. So we're getting them combined once again. There's also a store selling fresh produce and a clothes shop. So yes, character customization was already confirmed, but even in the first town here, we've already got a clothes shop. So you know how excited I am. I love character customization, and I'm glad they're adding even more into it in this region, as we've got a clothes shop right in the beginning town. So I'm assuming there's going to be one in at least every single town, and a lot more options to dress up our characters. In Galar, people and Pokemon have worked together to build thriving industries, as we see a cute little Wooloo, and I'm assuming his trainer here. Pokemon around towns and cities live in harmony with humans. We can see the other professor's lab in the background there, with these beautiful natural environments waiting for you to discover them. And I gotta agree, man, this actually looks beautiful to me. Which brings us to the discussion at hand, the graphics in these games, because a lot of people have been comparing them to other Nintendo Switch games that have come out recently and saying that these games don't live up to the potential of Pokemon on a console. And I have to agree, but at the same time, I feel like people do have their expectations a bit too high, myself included, because before any news came out, before Sword and Shield was even announced, and before we saw any trailers of this game, I really thought we were gonna get the Breath of the Wild of Pokemon, you know, like a big, sprawling, beautiful looking open world with HD graphics where Pokemon soar by. And I mean, we're kind of getting that with the wild area, just on a much smaller scale. Like, if anything, what I'm saying is Pokemon does still feel like a handheld game in comparison to other Nintendo Switch open world RPG titles. And I think there's a valid reason for that, beyond just Game Freak being lazy, as a lot of people like to say, and I'm gonna try to get into why. in this video. Before we do though, I want to point out some of the details I noticed in this trailer. As you can see, when the character is walking towards or past this little Wooloo, you can see the other research lab over there, which I think is where Sonia resides, and you can actually spot a hidden item on this rock here, which somehow Omori didn't notice. Like, dude, come on, you're the director of the game and you can't pick up the hidden item? I do like how it has that little sparkle though, to signify that there is a hidden item there, as opposed to previous Pokemon games where they were completely invisible and you either had to know where they are or use some type of item finder. Like, this is actually a really nice visual indicator that there is something hidden there, and I wonder what it actually is, because that rock has a strange pattern on it too, but I doubt that has anything to do with it. Actually, that brings me back to this store here selling fresh produce, as it says in the subtitles there, because that is actually a thing in these games. During the Nintendo Treehouse, when they first revealed and showed a lot of gameplay for the wild area, I noticed that the trainer kept picking up strange items that seemed like they're almost exclusively used for cooking, and we've seen cooking in other RPGs, but I don't think we ever have in Pokemon. Aside from, you know, Lana stirring up her pot in Sun and Moon. And I wonder what we actually do with all of this produce that we can apparently buy and just find laying around in the field during Pokemon Sword and Shield. Like, are they going to be for increasing Pokemon stats, or maybe to make your own style of potions and revives and stuff? Or could it have something to do with the juicer that we saw inside the Pokemon centers as well? I'm really not sure as of now. I don't think it has to do with the berry juices though, but we definitely know that produce slash vegetables and general food items. Is that what produce actually means? I'm not sure, but you can purchase it in the game as well as find it scattered around the ground, and I'm assuming this little sparkling item might actually be one of those food items that I guess you can use to, well, we don't actually know yet, but that's definitely going to be a feature in these games. Maybe your own character will actually need to, you know, eat for once and sustain himself. So all of these food items could either be for you or your Pokemon, but we don't know as of yet. We just know that, you know, the produce store does exist. But yeah, since this short trailer came out, I've seen a lot of people comparing Sword and Shield to other popular Nintendo Switch games and just in general saying the graphics don't look nearly as good as they expected. I feel like comparing one game to another isn't really fair sometimes, because of course every developer chooses to have their own style and their own flair to it, and Pokemon has always been known to be a handheld game. This is actually their first major step into the console territory, aside from back in the day when we had Pokemon Coliseum, which were actually not even produced by Game Freak. It was developed by Genius Sorority and published by Nintendo, so Game Freak really didn't have much to do with this aside from giving the Pokemon characters themselves, and that's more on the Pokemon Company, not Game Freak, because there actually is a difference, in case you didn't know. Now, I always love to pull up this list here for reference of the highest grossing media franchises of all time. Before we get into it, I want you to guess right now in the comments what you think the highest grossing media franchise is. This includes books, films, video games, comic books, animated films, television series, and any other form of media. Ding, 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 it's Pokemon beating out Hello Kitty, which, if you guys know anything about Hello Kitty, it's all over the place, or at least it used to be, which I guess it makes sense now why it's at second place, because I really haven't seen as much Hello Kitty lately, but there is still Gudetama. That dude is pretty popular. But check this out, Pokemon since 1996, it's actually one of the, well, it is up until Disney Princesses, the most recent on this list, and it's already estimated to have generated $95 billion in US dollars revenue. But the most important part here is the revenue breakdown. Where is Pokemon making their money from? If you notice, the video games do make a lot of money. This includes all of the main series titles, all of the mobile games. I'm assuming Pokemon Go is in there too, which if we took Pokemon Go's revenue alone, it would probably account for a lot of that 17 billion. But my point is, the video game sales are dwarfed in comparison to the merchandise sales at a whopping $64 billion. Pokemon is making a bunch of money from plushies, shirts, toys, underwear. I mean, if you can think of a popular product, you can probably slap a Pokemon on there and it will probably sell. I'm not even joking, guys. They have Pokemon everything, and that could be its entire own video on some of the weird Pokemon merch out there. But the point I'm trying to make here is that the games are not really the priority for the Pokemon Company anymore. They definitely know that they need to keep making games in order to introduce new Pokemon and therefore make new merch, and I believe this is why they continuously push to make a new game every year. I mean, even when I recently visited the Pokémon Center, or actually now known as the Nintendo World Store, I think, in New York City, they had so much merchandise for the Ultra Beast, and mostly the ones that were introduced in Ultra Sun and Moon. Tell me how they have Decidueye and Primarina, but Incineroar is nowhere to be seen. What is this? Nobody wants to buy Pansear, bro. Where is Incineroar? And I think that helps prove the point that they're pushing out a new Pokemon game every year just to keep the franchise going so that they can keep making more merchandise about it. Like, even the card game at this point has made more than half of what the video games have made and is steadily climbing up, which is why you see new expansions coming out so often. And of course, this means that every year, Game Freak has to push out a new game because the Pokemon Company needs them to keep making new Pokemon and sets these deadlines that are just, like, in my opinion, a little bit harsh. We used to see a new Pokemon game, or at least a new generation, take at least a couple of years to develop and really put all of their ideas forth and try to fit as much as they could into the games. And this could also have to do with the change of director, as of course Omori is the man in charge now. You guys may have heard of a man called Morimoto, who actually appears in a lot of the Pokemon games as a cameo Easter egg type of battle, but this guy has actually been so crucial to the development of some of my personal favorite Pokemon games of all time, Heart Gold and Soul Silver, and I think he also directed Pokemon Emerald, literally my top 2 favorite Pokemon games of all time, and I think it's no coincidence that they were both directed by the same guy. Actually, here's the image of all of the Pokemon directors and the games that they've handled so far. Of course, the original Satoshi here did all the way up to Gen 2. Then we had Masuda take over for Generation 3 and 4, I guess even 5 and 6 at some point. But Shigeki Morimoto, this man has appeared in so many of the Pokemon games as a cameo character, and I don't think there actually is a coincidence to this. The man has a love for this series and loves to jam-pack it with features. Like, when compared to Omori, who's been handling most of the recent games, I feel like you can definitely see a stylistic difference, especially in the features they choose to include in the games. And this has nothing to do with half of the Pokedex being cut. Like, that's a whole nother discussion that I feel like was coming eventually, and even though I understand the frustration of people whose favorite Pokemon is probably not going to end up being in the Galar region, it is something that they stated was meant to happen since Pokemon Sun and Moon, just because the game literally can't handle that much data. Like, there's over 800, probably now 900 creatures in the Galar region, with all the Z moves, Mega Evolutions, now Gigantamax, and all of those crazy G-Max moves. It's a lot to handle in one game, and I can't even use the argument that Sword and Shield only had a year to develop and that's why everything is being cut and that's why the graphics look like this, because if we remember way back when Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee were announced, they said they were already working on the next major core series title for the Nintendo Switch. So Sword and Shield has actually been in development for even longer than the year period that usually happens between one and another Pokemon game. So they've definitely had time to work on it, and I mean, just look at Omori's face here. That tells you everything. A lot of people love to compare this to, for example, Xenoblade Chronicles 2, which has a humongous, sprawling world with beautiful HD graphics, but I feel like when you actually get down to the details, this just doesn't look like Pokemon to me. I could see a spin-off Pokemon game kind of taking on this stylistic look, but definitely not the main series franchise, which has always been a little bit more bubbly and cartoony and just overall more geared towards kids. And when I look at something like this town looks absolutely amazing when compared to what we had just a couple of games ago in Pokemon Sun and Moon. Of course, that was going from the 3DS to the Switch, but being the same company still developing these games in Game Freak, they've never actually taken on a console title this big ever before. And I feel like they're really working their hardest to try and bring an experience that is still the core series Pokemon games while looking up to par with the Nintendo Switch. There's still some slight visual bugs here and there, like when the character's walking, you can see the shadow pop up out of nowhere. And I remember an old school trailer where the Steelix model wasn't even rendered in until you got close enough to it, which obviously those things are kind of weird, and maybe they might be fixed by the final version. We're really not sure since this is still demo gameplay, but I mean, the game comes out in a couple months, so most likely those things aren't gonna fixed, and that does kind of make me sad at times that Pokemon could look something like this, which is Dragon Quest XI also a game on the Nintendo Switch that I think released recently. And when you look at graphics like this in comparison to Pokemon, of course you can think to yourself like, why doesn't Game Freak make a game that looks like this? And I think at the end of the day, it really comes down to stylistic difference. This looks pretty similar to the wild area here, except of course all the textures and the tree graphics and everything look a whole lot prettier, as well as having that kind of bloom effect that a lot of modern games have. Even the creatures in the overworld. I mean, actually, I think the Pokemon in the wild area do look pretty nice, but a lot of people think to themselves like, why can't Pokemon make their games look like this? And at the end of it all, I really think it comes down to inexperience in the field of just making HD graphics, because Pokemon has been working on handheld games for what, 20 years now, and finally they're on a full console experience, which is the Switch. I guess it's kind of a hybrid between handheld and console, but the point is it has the power of a home console, and so they could definitely push the graphics even further, which is why I mentioned stylistic difference as well, because Pokemon definitely has a certain aesthetic to it. We saw in Pokemon X and Y Omega Ruby, they had the more chibi style characters and they were really bubbly and marshmallow looking almost. But ever since Sun and Moon, they decided to go with fully fledged, you know, real looking people, like not necessarily realistic, but you know, full body sized characters and trainers in comparison to the Pokemon, which are more like, you know, cute and bubbly looking. Okay, actually while watching this treehouse footage, I can't even explain this one. Like the guy isn't there and then suddenly the camera pans and boom, he just spawns into existence. Like that kind of stuff I feel like is a little bit unexcusable and they should try to fix by the final product. But as far as the actual quality and the look of the game goes, I think people are being a little bit too harsh. Like they're really comparing the trees to Majora's Mask. I mean, the more I look at this, the more valid I feel like the comparison is, at least in comparison of the textures. Like the trees don't really look all that different. And I guess it's a question of, is this a stylistic choice for Game Freak, or could they really do better and they're just choosing not to? And the thing is, we really don't know. But what we do know is ever since the switch of directors in Pokemon, the games have definitely been lacking in other areas other than just graphics and animation. We haven't really gotten as much content in the games either. Like the post-game of Pokemon Sun and Moon compared to something like Heart Gold Soul Silver, it's not even a comparison, dude. That's like a level 5 Wurmple to a level 100 Stunfisk, you know? Clearly, the Stunfisk is the more majestic creature here. But I really do think at the same time, Game Freak is trying their best. They're not actually being lazy, and at the end of the day, maybe they don't have enough employees, or they don't have enough time, or they just don't have enough experience making fully fledged console games. But I know a lot of people will also argue, hey, they could just get some third-party company, you know, like Genius Sorority, who worked on the Coliseum, and they could totally outsource and get some other company to work for them and do the graphics. But Pokemon is Game Freak's child. Like, you don't just give away your child to another company, you know, and I feel like that's what it comes down to at the end of the day. Maybe not laziness, but perhaps an unwillingness to let go of the past and truly try something different with the franchise. Pokemon has a formula, and clearly it's working, mostly in the merchandising department, but I would love to see the video games catch up to other modern titles, but I just feel like for now that's a little bit unrealistic, and perhaps just our expectations might be a little bit too high for the franchise. And hey, at the end of the day, all of these other games that I'm mentioning do exist out there. There's other RPGs you could be playing. There's even other monster collecting games that are coming out very soon that don't play exactly like Pokemon, but you really could just be playing those. If you want a high quality graphics game, they're out there for you. Like, super HD graphics is not something I've come to expect from Pokemon, and if anything, from the president of other Pokemon games, this looks amazing to me. I can't deny that it makes me a little sad to see the potential of what it could be, but at the same time, this is uncharted territory for Game Freak still, and they are actually also splitting their time developing another game called Town right now, which, if you guys haven't seen the trailer for that, I think the graphics actually look a lot nicer as well. Pretty similar to Sword and Shield, but they do have some more of those modern feel to it with cel-shaded characters and the blooms in the background. And this is being developed by Game Freak as well, so maybe they're actually working on this to make the next generation of Pokemon even better. And I guess what I'm trying to say is, Pokemon needs time. This is just the reality of the Pokemon franchise now. We're gonna be getting half-assed games every year instead of a fully fledged amazing game every couple of years, and you can bet that whenever the Pokemon Diamond and Pearl remakes come out, the rest of the Pokédex is going to be added in and everyone's going to buy it still. I understand that people have a right to voice their opinion and to want more from Game Freak, but at the same time, I feel like this isn't really doing anything, at least for Sword and Shield. These games are almost done already, and it's not like they're suddenly just gonna snap the Pokédex back into existence, but it could help out for future titles, so I do still understand. I also want to see a better Pokemon. I want to see them move away from the formula that has made them so much money already, but again, money is the biggest motivator, and if it works, it works. So I feel like they don't really have a lot of reason to move away from it. But then again, if the entire fan base moves away from the games, then they'll be forced to change. So it really has split the Pokemon community right down the middle, with people that support Game Freak being called Game Freak bootlickers out here. Okay, that was actually just me that was called that, and I found it kind of funny, but still, loving the game for what it is, I feel like there shouldn't be anything wrong with that. At the same time, there's nothing wrong with wanting more out of the Pokemon franchise. So at the end of the day, I just don't know what Game Freak is doing anymore, man. Like, just get these people working on town and get everyone on board and maybe give them 2 years and see what happens. Make Morimoto the director again. Like, this is the man who brought us the Battle Frontier. Like, in both titles, actually, one of the best features ever. Give this man all the money you've been making from the merchandise. Just please get him on board for the next game. That's what I would love to see. I guess Pokemon is just slow to change, and there's a lot of reasons for it that maybe I listed in this video, maybe not. I feel like I've just been rambling, but hopefully you guys enjoyed this discussion. Thank you so much for watching, and again, I'm welcome to any and all opinions down in the comments below. Until the next video, I think I'm gonna be doing a ranking of the Pokemon revealed so far, design-wise and their abilities and everything, so stay tuned for that, and I will catch you later.